I, 26F, lost my parents on a Tuesday. The police called me, not my sister, because I was listed as the first emergency contact. I was the reliable one. That was my role in the family. My sister, Clara, was the vibrant one. The one everyone loved. The one everyone forgave. I was the one who made sure the bills were paid and the appointments were kept. My parents loved us both, I know they did, but they adored Clara. They worried about me. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and hushed apologies. People kept telling me how strong I was. They would pat my arm and say, "You are holding up so well." For everyone, what they meant was, "Thank you for not making a scene." Clara was making enough of a scene for the both of us. She sobbed into my husband Mark's shoulder, her delicate frame shaking. He held her, stroking her hair, murmuring things I could not hear. It looked like comfort. It looked like what a good brother-in-law should do. But something about it felt wrong. A cold knot tightened in my stomach, a feeling separate from the vast, empty cavern of grief that had opened inside me. I told myself it was the shock. I told myself I was imagining things. Grief makes you paranoid. It makes you see shadows where there is only light. Mark had always been fond of Clara. He thought her flightiness was charming. He often said she just needed someone to look out for her. It seemed he had decided that someone was him. For the entire week between their death and the burial, he was glued to her side. He drove her to the funeral home. He helped her pick out the casket flowers. He answered her late-night calls when she said she had a nightmare. "She needs me," he told me one night, when I asked why he had not come to bed until 3 in the morning. "She's falling apart, honey. You're so strong, but she's fragile." I said, "I need you too." My voice was a whisper. I felt like I was fading, becoming invisible in my own home. He kissed my forehead. "I know, and I'm here. But Clara, she's all alone." She was not alone. She was in our house. She had been staying in our guest room since the news broke. I was the one who felt alone. I would lie in our bed, listening to the floorboards creak as he paced the hallway outside her door, waiting for her to fall asleep. The grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But this new feeling, this cold suspicion, was a sharp, jagged thing, poking at the edges of my sorrow. The day of the funeral, I watched them. I stood by the graveside, dirt clinging to my shoes, and I watched my husband hold my sister's hand. He did not let go. Not when the priest said his final words, not when the first handful of dirt was thrown onto the coffins. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a slow, soothing circle. It was an intimate gesture. It was a gesture he used to give me. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn wind. I looked away, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. I had to be the strong one. That night, after everyone had left and the house was filled with the smell of leftover food and wilting flowers, I found them in the kitchen. They were standing close, their heads bowed together. Clara was crying again. Mark was wiping her tears with his thumb. "I just can't believe they're gone," she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow. "I know," Mark said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm here. I'll take care of you." He pulled her into a hug. It was a long hug. Too long. Her face was buried in his chest. His hand was resting on the small of her back. I cleared my throat. They sprang apart, their eyes wide with something that looked like guilt. "Oh," Clara said, dabbing at her eyes. I was just feeling overwhelmed. "Of course," I said, my voice flat. "It's been a long day." Mark walked over to me and put his arm around my shoulders. It felt stiff. It felt like an obligation. "We should all get some rest," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. The image of their embrace was burned into my mind. I felt like a stranger in my own life, watching a play where I no longer knew my lines. That night, I lay awake long after Mark's breathing had evened out into a deep sleep. The cold knot in my stomach was now a raging fire. I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I had not lost just my parents that week. I was losing my husband too, and my sister, The person who should have been sharing my grief was the one taking him from me. The next morning, I tried to talk to Mark. I needed to hear him deny it. I needed him to laugh and tell me I was being crazy, that grief was making me see things. I found him in the living room, packing up some of my parents' photo albums that I had brought back to the house. Clara was sitting on the floor beside him, pointing at a picture. "Oh, look at that one," she said with a watery giggle. "Dad with that terrible mustache." Mark smiled. It was a real smile, the kind I had not seen on his face all week when he looked at me. He thought he was so cool. I stood in the doorway. "Mark, can I talk to you for a second?" He looked up, and his smile faded.
Sure.
"What's up?" I waited for Clara to leave, but she stayed put, watching us with wide, innocent eyes. I had to do this in front of her. Maybe it was better that way. "I feel like I haven't seen you all week," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "It feels like you're spending all your time with Clara." Mark sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "We've been over this. Her grief is different from yours.
She's more
expressive. She needs more support. And I don't," I asked, the words catching in my throat. Clara stood up then, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Oh, no. Is this my fault?"
I'm so sorry.
"I didn't mean to take him away from you. I'm just such a mess." She looked at Mark, her lower lip trembling. "Maybe I should go stay with Aunt Carol." "No," Mark said immediately, reaching for her hand. "Don't be silly. You're fine right here. We're family." He turned back to me, his eyes hard. "She just lost her parents. Can you please not make this about you?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Make this about me. As if my grief was a performance. As if my pain was an inconvenience. "I just lost my parents too," I said quietly. "I know that," he said, his voice softening slightly, but the edge was still there. "But you're handling it. You're strong." "She's not." I looked at my sister. She was watching me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and triumph. In that moment I saw it. It was not just comfort he was giving her. It was something more.
And she was not just accepting it.
She was taking it. She was soaking it up, leaving nothing for me. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. My entire world was tilting on its axis, and I was losing my balance. I decided to call my best friend, Sarah. I needed an outside perspective. I needed someone to tell me I was wrong. "It's probably just the grief," she said, her voice gentle over the phone. "Everything is heightened right now. You're all in shock." "I know, but Sarah, you should see them," I said, pacing my bedroom. He looks at her differently. He touches her arm, her back. It's constant. He barely looks at me. He's trying to be a supportive brother-in-law, she reasoned. And maybe he doesn't know how to comfort you. You've always been the one who holds it together. Maybe, I conceded, but I did not believe it. It just feels predatory. Like she's using this tragedy to get closer to him. "Clara has always been a bit of a drama queen," Sarah admitted. "But to do something like that now? That's evil." "Is it?" I asked, more to myself than to her. "Or is it just who she is?" A few days later, Clara announced she was not ready to go back to her own apartment yet. She wanted to stay with us a little longer. "Of course," Mark said without even looking at me for approval. "Stay as long as you need." That night, I was doing laundry, a mundane task that felt strangely grounding amidst the chaos. I was pulling Mark's clothes from the hamper when something small and shiny fell onto the floor. It was an earring. A small, silver hoop with a tiny pearl. It was not mine. I knew exactly who it belonged to. It was part of a set my parents had given Clara for her last birthday. I picked it up, the metal cold against my palm. I walked out of the laundry room and into the living room, where Mark was watching TV. Clara was not there. She had gone out for a walk. I held out my hand. "What's this?" I asked. He glanced at it. "An earring." "I know what it is," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I found it in our laundry hamper. With your clothes. It's Clara's." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he would confess. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a flash of panic. But then it was gone, replaced by a cool defensiveness. Okay, he said slowly. And? She probably lost it. Maybe it fell off when she was helping with the laundry. She hasn't helped with the laundry, I said. I've done all of it. He shrugged, turning his attention back to the TV. I don't know what you want me to tell you. It's an earring. She probably dropped it in the hallway, and it got kicked into the hamper. It's not a big deal. He was lying. I could feel it. The casualness of his dismissal was more damning than any confession. It was not just an earring. It was proof. It was the first solid piece of evidence in a case I had been building in my mind. The fire in my gut burned hotter. This was not just grief-fueled paranoia. This was real. I went back to the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, the earring still in my hand. It felt heavy, like a stone. I thought about confronting Clara, about screaming at both of them. But what would that accomplish? They would deny it. They would call me hysterical, crazy with grief. They would turn it around and make me the villain. Mark's words echoed in my head. Can you please not make this about you?
No. I would not give them that satisfaction.
I would not be the hysterical wife. I would be the strong one, just like everyone expected. But my strength would no longer be for their benefit. It would be for mine. I opened my jewelry box and dropped the earring inside. I would keep it. It was a reminder, a promise to myself that I would find out the truth. The next few weeks were a living hell. I existed in a state of hypervigilance, watching their every move. I became a detective in my own home. I noted the late-night whispers from the guest room. I saw the lingering touches in the hallway. I read the text messages Mark thought he had deleted. He was not very good at covering his tracks. He would delete the thread on his phone, but he forgot about the synced messages on his laptop. Thinking of you. One of his texts to her read. Wish I was with you instead of in this meeting. Me too, she had replied. Come see me when you get home? She'll be asleep.
She was talking about me.
I was no longer a person. I was an obstacle, an inconvenience to be managed. Reading those words felt like swallowing shards of glass, each one cut deeper than the last. I took pictures of the screen with my own phone, documenting everything. The evidence was piling up, a mountain of betrayal that was becoming too large to ignore. I started looking into their histories, trying to understand how this could have happened. Mark and I had been married for 4 years. We were happy, or so I had thought. We had plans. We were talking about starting a family. Had it all been a lie? Clara had always been jealous of me, but I had dismissed it as typical sibling rivalry. She was the pretty one, the popular one. I was the smart one, the responsible one. She got the attention, but I got the respect. I had a stable career, a loving husband, a life I had built for myself. She drifted from job to job, from one failed relationship to another, always relying on our parents to bail her out. I realized now that she did not just want attention. She wanted what I had. And she saw our parents' death as the perfect opportunity to take it. One evening, I decided to test them. I told them I was going out to meet Sarah for dinner and would be back late. Oh, good, Clara said, her smile a little too bright. You deserve a break. Have fun. Mark kissed me goodbye. Drive safe, he said. I did not go to meet Sarah. I drove to the end of our street, parked my car where they could not see it, and I waited. I sat in the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt sick, like a spy in my own life. But I had to know. An hour passed. Then another. Just as I was about to give up, to call myself a fool and go home, I saw it. The lights in our living room went out. Then, a few minutes later, the light in my bedroom, our bedroom, turned on. I could not breathe. The air was trapped in my lungs, a painful, burning pressure.
They were in my bed.
In the bed I shared with my husband. The bed where we had made plans for our future. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, that it almost felt unreal. I wanted to storm into the house, to rip open the bedroom door and confront them. But my body would not move. I was frozen in place, paralyzed by a mixture of rage and despair. I finally drove away, my vision blurred by tears. I ended up at Sarah's house, my hands shaking so badly I could barely ring the doorbell. When she opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me into a hug without a word. I sobbed into her shoulder, the story pouring out of me in a torrent of broken words and choked sobs. "They were in my bed, Sarah," I cried. "In my bed." She held me tighter. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." We sat up all night talking. She listened while I raged, while I cried, while I planned. By the time the sun came up, my tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. "I don't know yet," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "But I'm not going to let them get away with this. They're not just cheating on me. They're dancing on my parents' graves. And I won't stand for it." The next day, I went home. I walked into the house like nothing had happened. Mark was in the kitchen making coffee. He smiled at me. "Hey, you're up early," he said. "How was dinner with Sarah?" "It was good," I said, my voice even. "We had a lot to talk about." Clara came downstairs a few minutes later, wrapped in one of my silk robes. She yawned and stretched, looking completely at home. "Morning," she chirped. "Is there any coffee left?" I looked at her, and my robe clinging to her body, and I felt a wave of nausea. But I pushed it down. I smiled back at her, a tight, brittle smile that did not reach my eyes. "Of course," I said. "Help yourself." I had to play the long game. A direct confrontation would only give them the chance to spin the narrative, to paint me as the unstable, grieving widow. I needed more than just the knowledge of their affair. I needed leverage. I needed something that would not just expose them, but destroy them. And I had a feeling that if I dug deep enough into my sister's life, I would find exactly what I was looking for. My parents' house needed to be cleared out. It was a task I had been dreading, a final, painful goodbye. Clara had offered to help, but her version of helping was to sit on the floor and cry over old photo albums while I did all the heavy lifting. Now I saw it as an opportunity. The house held more than just memories. It held secrets. I started in my father's office. He was a meticulous man. He kept records of everything. Bills, bank statements, tax returns, all neatly filed away in cabinets. I spent days going through his paperwork, my grief a constant companion. Every letterhead, every signature, was a fresh reminder of what I had lost. But I pushed through, driven by a new, darker purpose. At first, everything seemed normal. Mortgages, utility bills, investment statements. Their finances looked solid. They had a healthy retirement fund, a paid-off house. It did not make sense. Clara was always asking them for money. Where was it going? Then I found it. Tucked away in the back of a filing cabinet, in a folder labeled Miscellaneous, was a series of bank statements from an account I did not recognize. It was a joint account in my parents' names, but the transactions were strange. There were large, regular withdrawals. Thousands of dollars at a time, all transferred to another account. An account I did not have the details for. I found a corresponding notebook. My dad's familiar, neat handwriting filled the pages. It was a ledger. He was tracking the money. Next to each withdrawal, he had written a single word: Clara. My blood ran cold. He knew. He had been giving her this money, and he had been tracking it.
But why?
The amounts were staggering. Over the last 2 years, she had taken more than $200,000 from them. Their entire retirement savings. I kept digging. I found letters from the bank, warning them about their depleted funds. I found loan applications they had filled out, trying to borrow against the value of their house. My parents, who had been so careful, so financially responsible their entire lives, were on the brink of ruin. And it was because of my sister. What could she possibly need that much money for? I thought back over the last few years. She had no expensive habits that I knew of. She drove an old car. She lived in a modest apartment. She always claimed to be broke, but I had assumed it was due to her inability to hold down a job. This was something else. This was a secret, a big one. My investigation took me to Clara's apartment. I still had a key from years ago, one she had given me for emergencies. I let myself in one afternoon when I knew she would be out with Mark. Her place was messier than I remembered, clothes strewn everywhere, dishes piled in the sink. I started searching, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I did not know what I was looking for, but I would know it when I saw it. In her bedside table, beneath a pile of magazines, I found a stack of letters. They were from a casino, not a glamorous one in Las Vegas, but a local one about an hour's drive from our city. They were letters from their VIP host, offering her exclusive promotions, free rooms, and high-limit tables. And tucked in with those letters were statements. Markers. She owed the casino a fortune. She had a gambling addiction. A severe one. It all clicked into place. The constant need for money. The secrecy. The way she could be charming one minute and desperate the next. She had been bleeding our parents dry, and they had been covering for her, trying to protect her, to fix her, just like everyone always did. But there was more. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a crumpled piece of paper. It was a copy of a legal document.
Alia.
The casino was putting a lien on her assets for non-payment. But the document was not just for her. My parents' names were on it too. They had co-signed her debts. They had risked their own financial security to save her. And she had betrayed them. She had taken their love, their trust, their money, and she had gambled it all away. And now she was taking my husband. The rage that filled me was pure and white-hot. This was not just about an affair anymore. This was about justice. For my parents, for the life they had built, and the peace they had deserved in their final years. I took pictures of everything. The letters, the statements, the lien. I left the apartment exactly as I had found it. She would never know I had been there. I went back to my car, my hands steady, my mind clear. I finally had it. The leverage I needed. The secret that would bring her perfect world crashing down around her. I waited. I knew I had to choose my moment carefully. A private confrontation would be useless. She would lie. She would cry. She would manipulate Mark into taking her side. No, this had to be public. It had to be undeniable. I had to strip away her carefully constructed facade in front of everyone who had ever enabled her, everyone who had ever chosen her over me. A few months passed. Life settled into a strange, unbearable routine. Clara and Mark were no longer trying to hide their relationship. They were a couple now. They held hands in our house, the house my parents had left to me and Clara jointly. They acted as if I was the guest, the intruder in their new life. I played my part. I was the quiet, grieving sister, the abandoned wife. I was numb. I was broken. That is what they wanted to see. And so, that is what I showed them. Inside, I was anything but broken. I was building myself back up, piece by piece, forged in the fire of my anger. I met with a lawyer. I started the divorce proceedings. I made sure my finances were separate from Mark's. I was methodically dismantling the life we had built together, preparing for the day when I would dismantle theirs. Then came the announcement. They were getting married. Clara told me over dinner one night. She had made a special meal, her attempt at a peace offering. Mark sat beside her, holding her hand, a proud smile on his face. "We have some news," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Mark and I are getting married." I looked at them. The happy couple. My sister and my soon-to-be ex-husband. They were building their future on the ashes of my past. "Congratulations," I said, my voice hollow. "We want you to be there, of course," Mark said. "It would mean a lot to us. To show that there are no hard feelings. That we can all be a family. No hard feelings." The audacity of it took my breath away. He wanted my blessing. He wanted me to stand by and watch them celebrate their betrayal. "Of course I'll be there," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I wouldn't miss it for the world. They looked relieved. They had mistaken my compliance for forgiveness. They had no idea what was coming. They were planning a wedding. I was planning a war. The wedding was set for 6 months later. A lavish affair at a fancy country club. Clara was in her element, planning every detail, from the ice sculptures to the string quartet. She would call me sometimes, asking for my opinion on flower arrangements or bridesmaid dresses. I would listen patiently, offering bland, non-committal answers. Every conversation was a new twist of the knife, but I endured it. I kept my eyes on the prize. During this time, I solidified my case. I contacted the casino's legal department, posing as a representative for my parents' estate. I managed to get a full accounting of Clara's debt and my parents' involvement. The numbers were even worse than I had imagined. They had not just lost their savings, they had mortgaged their future. They had taken out a reverse mortgage on their home to pay her debts, leaving almost nothing behind. The house I was living in, the house I thought I would inherit, was now owned by the bank. All because of her. I also spoke with my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. She was one of the few family members who had always been wary of Clara's charm. I met her for coffee one afternoon, my folder of evidence tucked into my bag. "I need to talk to you about something," I started, my voice low. "It's about Mom and Dad. And Clara." She listened intently as I laid out the story. I showed her the bank statements, the casino letters, the lien. Her face grew paler with each page she turned. "I knew it," she whispered, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I knew she was trouble. Your mother." She would call me sometimes, crying. She would never say what it was about, just that she was so worried about Clara. I thought it was just her usual drama. I had no idea it was this bad. "They were protecting her," I said. "They always did." "To their own ruin," she said, shaking her head. "And now she's marrying your husband? After all this? That girl has no soul." "I'm going to expose her," I said, my voice firm. "At the wedding." Aunt Carol looked at me, a long, hard look. I expected her to try to talk me out of it, to warn me about causing a scene. But she just nodded slowly.
"Good," she said.
"It's about time someone held her accountable. Your parents were saints, but their biggest mistake was letting her get away with everything. What do you need from me?" "Just be there," I said. "And be ready." The day of the wedding arrived. It was a beautiful summer day, the kind of day Clara had always dreamed of for her perfect wedding. I stood in front of my mirror, looking at my reflection. I was wearing a simple, elegant black dress. A dress for mourning. But I was not in mourning anymore. I was an executioner. I drove to the country club, my stomach in knots. This was it. There was no turning back. I walked into the ceremony as the guests were being seated. I saw faces I had not seen since my parents' funeral. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. They all smiled at me, a little sadly, a little awkwardly. They saw the wronged wife, the poor, abandoned woman. They had no idea who I really was. I took my seat in the back row. I watched as Mark stood at the altar, looking handsome in his tuxedo. I felt a pang of something, a ghost of the love I once had for him. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard anger.
He was weak.
He had let her manipulate him, just as my parents had. He deserved what was coming to him. Then Clara appeared at the end of the aisle. She was stunning in a white, lace gown, a radiant smile on her face. She looked like a princess. The picture of innocence. The hypocrisy of it made me sick. As she walked down the aisle, she caught my eye. She gave me a small, pitying smile. A smile that said, "I won. I have it all now." I just smiled back, a calm, serene smile. Her smile faltered for a second, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But then it was gone, and she turned her attention back to her groom. The ceremony was a blur. I sat through the vows, the rings, the kiss, my heart pounding a steady, relentless rhythm against my ribs. They were pronounced husband and wife. The crowd erupted in applause. I did not clap. I just watched, my face a blank mask. The reception was held in a grand ballroom overlooking the golf course. The tables were adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. A band was playing softly in the corner. It was everything Clara had ever wanted.
A fairy tale wedding.
But every fairy tale has a villain. And tonight, I was ready to play my part. I sat at a table with Aunt Carol and a few other relatives. I ate my dinner, I made small talk. I was biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment. It came during the toasts. The best man, Mark's college friend, gave a generic, rambling speech. Then the maid of honor, one of Clara's sycophantic friends, gushed about how perfect Clara and Mark were for each other. Then, the father of the groom stood up to speak. After he finished, there was a pause. The MC was about to introduce the band for the first dance. I stood up. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice clear and steady. It carried across the silent room. All eyes turned to me. I saw a flash of panic on Clara's face. Mark looked confused. I walked towards the stage, picking up a microphone from the stand. "Don't," Mark said, starting to get up from his seat. But his new father-in-law put a hand on his arm, holding him back. Everyone was watching me, their curiosity piqued. I stood in the center of the dance floor, the microphone in my hand. I looked at the happy couple, sitting at their head table, bathed in the soft glow of the spotlights. "Clara, Mark," I began, my voice ringing through the speakers. "What a beautiful day. What a beautiful wedding. I don't think I've ever seen you look happier, Clara." She gave me a tight, forced smile. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I know some of you might be surprised to see me here today," I continued, my eyes scanning the crowd. "And even more surprised to see me making a toast. After all, it wasn't that long ago that Mark was my husband. It wasn't that long ago that we were all grieving the loss of my parents." A murmur went through the room. I could feel the tension rising. Mark was glaring at me, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. Clara's smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure dread. "But family is complicated, isn't it?" I said, my voice taking on a harder edge. "And grief does strange things to people. For some of us, it's a private, quiet thing. For others, it's an opportunity." I paused, letting the word hang in the air. An opportunity to find comfort in the most unexpected of places. For example, in your sister's husband's arms. While your parents are barely cold in the ground. There was a collective gasp from the crowd. People were turning to each other, whispering. Clara's face was ashen. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice just loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "I'm just telling a story, sis," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "Our story. About how you cried on my husband's shoulder, and how that crying somehow ended up with you in my bed. The bed I shared with him. The bed in the house our parents left us." Mark stood up then, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's enough," he shouted. "Security." But no one moved. Everyone was captivated, horrified. They were leaning forward in their seats, eager to hear the rest. "Oh, I'm just getting started," I said, looking directly at him. "You see, I thought this was just a simple story of betrayal. A classic tale of a cheating husband and a backstabbing sister.
But it's so much more than that.
Because my sister, the beautiful bride, she's not just a thief of husbands. She's a thief of so much more." I reached into the small purse I was carrying and pulled out a stack of papers. They were the copies I had made. The bank statements. The casino letters. The lien on my parents' house. "This is a story about money," I said, holding up the papers. "A lot of money. Over $200,000 to be exact. The entirety of our parents' retirement savings. The money they worked their entire lives for. The money they were supposed to use to enjoy their golden years." I started walking towards the head table, my heels clicking on the polished floor. "Where did all that money go, Clara? Did you spend it on this wedding? On that beautiful dress? Or did you spend it at the casino? On the blackjack tables? On the slot machines?" Clara was staring at me, her mouth hanging open, her eyes wide with terror. She looked like a cornered animal. "You're lying," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She's lying. She's crazy with grief." "Am I?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I reached the head table and dropped the papers in front of her. Then what are these? These are bank statements showing the transfers from mom and dad's account. And these? These are letters from the casino, congratulating you on your VIP status. And this is my favorite part. This is a copy of the lien. The one you let our parents co-sign, putting their own home at risk to cover your gambling debts. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the room. I saw Aunt Carol nodding, a grim look on her face. I saw the confused and horrified expressions on the faces of Mark's parents. They were looking at Clara as if they had never seen her before. Our parents died in a car accident, I said, my voice breaking for the first time, not with sadness, but with pure, unadulterated rage. They were stressed. They were fighting. My mother called Aunt Carol, crying about how worried she was. I know why they were fighting now. They were fighting about you, Clara. About the ruin you had brought upon them. You didn't just break their hearts. You broke their spirits. You killed them just as surely as if you had been behind the wheel of that car. Clara finally broke. She let out a guttural sob, burying her face in her hands. It's not true, she wailed. It's not true. Mark put his arm around her, but he was looking at the papers on the table. He picked up one of the bank statements, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked from the paper to Clara and then to me. I could see the dawning horror in his eyes as he realized that I was telling the truth. Clara, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What is this? She just kept sobbing, unable to answer. I turned to the guests. So, let's raise a glass, I said, my voice ringing with bitter triumph. To the happy couple. To a marriage built on a foundation of lies, deceit, and the destruction of a family. May you both get exactly what you deserve. I dropped the microphone onto the table with a loud thud. The feedback screeched through the ballroom. I turned around and walked away, my head held high. I did not look back. I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Shouting, crying, the sound of a glass breaking. But I just kept walking. I walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, and into the cool night air. I took a deep breath, the first real breath I had taken in months. It was over. The secret was out. The bomb had detonated. Aunt Carol caught up with me in the parking lot. She put her hand on my arm. Are you okay? She asked, her voice soft. I looked at her and, to my surprise, I smiled. It was a real smile. I think I am, I said. For the first time in a long time, I think I'm going to be okay. What you did in there, she started, shaking her head in disbelief. It was incredible. It was necessary, I said. She needed to be exposed. They all needed to see who she really is. They see it now, she said grimly. Mark's parents were demanding answers. He looked like he was going to be sick. The wedding is over. I think the marriage might be too. Good, I said, the word tasting sweet on my tongue. Let them tear each other apart. They deserve it. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, just as I had planned. The wedding, of course, ended that night. I heard later from a cousin that Mark's parents had pulled him aside, demanding to know if what I said was true. When he couldn't deny it, when Clara's only defense was hysterical sobbing, they told him they were ashamed of him. They left, and most of their side of the family followed. Clara's fairy tale wedding ended with her sitting alone at the head table, her expensive dress stained with tears and champagne, surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. Mark called me the next day. I let it go to voicemail. He called again.
And again.
He sent a barrage of texts. We need to talk. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the money. She lied to me. She lied about everything. I made a terrible mistake. Please, just talk to me. His pleas for forgiveness were pathetic. He didn't know? Maybe not about the money, but he knew about the affair. He knew he was betraying me during the worst week of my life. His ignorance about her deeper sins didn't absolve him of his own. I never responded. I blocked his number. My lawyer sent his lawyer a final offer for the divorce settlement. He signed it without a fight. Clara, predictably, tried to play the victim. She sent out a long, rambling email to the entire family, accusing me of being a bitter, jealous liar. She claimed I had fabricated the evidence to ruin her happiness. But it was too late. The seeds of doubt had been sown, and the evidence I had presented was too compelling. Aunt Carol made sure to forward my evidence to a few key family members, the ones who had always been Clara's biggest cheerleaders. The truth spread like wildfire. One of them, our Uncle Robert, called me. He had always doted on Clara, always slipped her $100 bill at family gatherings. I got the documents from Carol, he said, his voice heavy. Is it all true? Every word, I said. He was silent for a long moment. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. My God, he whispered. We were all such fools. Your father. He called me a few weeks before the accident. He wanted to borrow money. He sounded desperate. I turned him down. I thought he'd made some bad investments. I had no idea, his voice broke. It wasn't your fault, Uncle Robert, I said, my own voice softening. She fooled all of us. That's what she does. Not anymore, he said, his voice hardening with resolve. Not anymore. The family turned on her. The aunts and uncles who had once praised her beauty and charm now saw her for the parasite she was. She was ostracized. No one returned her calls. When she showed up at a family barbecue a few months later, she was asked to leave. The social currency she had traded on her entire life was now worthless. As for the house, the situation was grim. The reverse mortgage meant the bank owned most of it. There was very little equity left. My lawyer advised me that since Clara was a co-owner, we would have to sell it and split the meager proceeds. I approached Clara with the proposition. It was the first time we had spoken since the wedding. She looked terrible. She had lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. The vibrant spark she always had was gone, replaced by a dull, sullen resentment. I need you to agree to sell the house, I said, keeping my voice businesslike. So you can take that from me too? She sneered. There's nothing to take, Clara, I said, my patience wearing thin. The bank owns it. Thanks to you. We'll be lucky to walk away with a few $1,000s each. But we have to sell, or they'll foreclose. She eventually agreed, having no other choice. The house sold quickly. After all the debts were paid, we each received a check for just under $5,000. A paltry sum to represent our parents' entire life's work. I looked at my check and then at her. Was it worth it? I asked her, a genuine question. All the lies, the betrayal, the money you stole from them. Was it worth it for this? She just glared at me, her eyes full of hatred. You ruined my life, she spat. No, I said, my voice cold and clear. You ruined your own life. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see you doing it. I walked away and never looked back. I used my share of the money to put a down payment on a small apartment in a new city. I needed a fresh start, a place where I was not defined by my past, by my family's tragedy, or by my sister's betrayal. I heard through the grapevine that Mark's divorce from Clara was even faster than ours. He wanted nothing to do with her. He moved to another state, trying to escape the shame and humiliation. Clara was left with nothing. No husband, no family support, no money. She had to get a real job for the first time in her life, working as a waitress in a diner. The last I heard, she was sharing a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, still drowning in debt. She had wanted my life so badly, and in the end, she had only succeeded in destroying her own. My life, on the other hand, began to heal. The first year was hard. The grief was still there, a constant ache in my heart. But it was no longer overshadowed by anger and betrayal. I found a new job, I made new friends. I started to rediscover who I was without the roles I had always played. The dutiful daughter, the responsible sister, the forgiving wife. I was just me, and for the first time, that felt like enough. Sarah came to visit me in my new apartment. We sat on my small balcony, drinking wine and watching the sunset. You seem happy, she said, a warm smile on her face. I am, I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. It's a quiet happiness, but it's mine. Have you heard from any of them? she asked carefully.
No, I said. And I don't want to.
That chapter of my life is closed. We were silent for a while, just enjoying the peaceful evening. I thought about my sister, about the wreckage she had left in her wake. I did not feel pity for her. I did not feel hatred anymore either. I felt nothing. She was a ghost from a past life, a cautionary tale. She had spent her whole life taking, convinced that the world owed her everything she desired. She never understood that a real life, is not something you take. It is something you build. My life was still under construction, but the foundation was strong. It was built on truth, on self-respect, on the quiet strength I had found in the depths of my despair. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was not afraid. I was free. She wanted my life. Now she can have the ruins of it. I, on the other hand, was building something new, and it was going to be beautiful,